Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So we are back on the tabletop with the Demons of Chaos. It's actually only my second game playing Demons of Chaos, so hopefully you'll get to see how my list evolves and how my thinking and tactics change game to game. And it was my first time playing against a Beastmen army, so I was looking forward to this one. 1500 points. I'm starting off with my general, who is a Herald of Khorne on a Juggernaut. You can just spot him at the back of the picture there, so if you look at the top left hand side, the third model along, you can see him with some big horns on his head and his hellblade swinging violently in the air as he thunders forward on his massive beast mount. He is in a unit there of 3 what they call blood crushers with the Band of Eternal Flame. There's another 4 blood crushers with full command. At the front there, you've got 33 Bloodletters with full command. There's 2 units of 6 Chaos Furies and 1 Skull Cannon. So all Demons of Khorne, no magic, no shooting. Well, sorry, there is some shooting. We've got a Skull Cannon, don't forget. Just the 1 shooting attack, no magic, all movement and combat. And the Beastmen from left to right. So we're starting off with 5 Ungor skirmishers hiding in the woods, followed by a big unit of, I want to say 40 or maybe 38 Gore. And in that unit they've got a, I believe it's a level 2 Shaman on the left hand side and the Battle Standard Bearer on the right hand corner. And behind them you can see a unit of 5 Harpies. Next up is the Tuskor Chariot, and following that we've got, I believe they're called Razor Gore. And there is 6 of them in that unit, with a Doom Bowl general attached to the unit as well. You can see him there. He's actually got some pink wings and a huge axe and a massive snout. And we've got another 5 Ungor skirmishers in front of him, and that's the whole 1500 points. So really, all of the power is in that unit of Gore and this unit of Razor Gore, with the general next to him. And I believe that the general is monstrous infantry and the Razor Gore are monstrous, what they call monstrous cavalry. No, monstrous beasts. So they're not quite the same unit type. So my cannon could, in fact, target the Doom Ball, and he wouldn't be able to get a lookout cert. So let's see how we do with that. I'll have some close-ups of the demon army in another video, but that's the deployment then. As you can see, I've got my big unit of Bloodletters in the middle there. There's 33 of them altogether. The Blood Crushers either side with the Furies in the back. My plan is that obviously the Furies can just fly over the top, so there's no real sort of rush to put them out in the front there. I can just keep them in the back and bring them up when they're needed. And the Skull Cannon is off on the left hand side there. I was fortunate enough that I think we had the same number of drops, and Mark elected to start deploying first, so we get the +1. I then got to put that Skull Cannon down last, and therefore I was able to put it in such a way so that he could move up and start shooting at that Razor Gore unit with the general Doom Ball attached to it. And I was also lucky enough to get first turn. Only a small amount of movement then. I moved the Skull Cannon up to get an angle on that Razor Gore unit. 1 unit of Furies has come up on the left hand flank, as you can see in the picture, and that was all my movement. So before the game I learned that the Shaman was on the Law of Shadow. Sorry, he was level 1, I think I said level 2 earlier, it's level 1, and he's gone for the Melikoth's Mystifying Miasma signature spell as his spell. He also had a bound spell, which was the Ruby Ring. I rolled up a lesser gift for my Herald, and I think I got impact hits or something like that, but I ended up swapping it out for a Sword of Swift Slaying to give him always strikes first, because he's got initiative 6, so some rerolls would be handy in certain combats. He can always swap that for the Hellblade if he wants the Killing Blow instead. And we were also playing with the addition of Marks of Chaos for the Beastmen list, which I think is a Triple Crown idea, or that's where I've seen it, to give the Beastmen army a bit of a boost so they can take Mark of Chaos as per the Warriors of Chaos rulebook. The Doom Ball had the Mark of Tzeentch, giving him an extra +1 to his ward save, which made me think, well, perhaps he's got quite a good ward save then, because he can take, obviously, magic items as well. With the Mark of Tzeentch, he may have something like a 4-up or even a 3-up ward save. So I decided to aim the Skull Cannon at the unit rather than at the Doom Ball on the end of it, and I killed one Razor Gore. First blood to the Demons of Chaos. Beastmen turn 1. Here come the Beastmen. There's a massive unit of Gore marching across the tabletop. Looks like they've also got it could be a Ukrainian banner there. Good to see represented. And it's good to see some dark-skinned Beastmen as well. You don't normally see them. Actually, it's my first time playing Beastmen anyway, but in the pictures I see online and stuff, they've normally got the sort of light brown colour scheme, so they're looking good. And the movement is quite tentative. You've got those Ungor Raiders on the left-hand side, sort of coming through to the edge of the woods, ready to fire their bows. The Harpies moving along that side to support them as well. And the Chariot and Razor Gore sort of coming up on that side. The Chariot sort of moving through that space between the two big units, and the final unit of Ungor Raiders also just ahead. I let the Melicoths go off on one of my units of Blood Crushers, and because they probably won't get into combat until the following turn anyway, and I tried to dispel the fireball that was aimed at my Furies. And that's how things look at the beginning of Demons turn 2. Now I've got one charge to declare, which is those Furies on the left hand side, which are slightly out of the picture, are going into those Ungor Raiders in the woods. And that's all for the charges. Other than that, I'm doing very minor repositioning and just sort of thinking strategically to just wait for those Beastmen to come at me a bit more. They don't really have any shooting attacks other than a few short bows from those Ungor skirmishers, so I can really just try and take a few pot shots with the cannon to try and kill a Razor Gore or two, perhaps take that Chariot out before the Beastmen get to me, and then try and gang up on them in the middle of the board. If you look at the terrain there is a little bit of a bottleneck, and my units are quite wide, so either I've got to wait till those Gore come in before trying to gang up on them, or I've got to pick 2 out of 3 of those units to charge into the middle of the board. The Gore actually have the Mark of Khorne, which is both terrifying because they're going to have a huge amount of attacks, especially in horde formation, but also perhaps an opportunity, because if they're frenzied, if they do get detached from the general there or roll bad on a leadership test, they could end up coming out of position, which could allow me to flank charge them, so we'll see how it goes. So the Furies go into the Ungor Raiders, and these Furies do have the Mark of Khorne, which means they are strength 5 on the charge, and they come in, hack up some Ungor Raiders, and do very well. They don't lose anyone, don't lose a single Fury. The Ungor Raiders break and flee through the Harpies. The Harpies do pass their panic, and the Furies pursue just about an inch in front of those Harpies, which is not looking good for the Furies, unfortunately, because it means the next turn those Harpies are going to charge in, and the Harpies have 2 attacks, and I obviously won't get my strength bonus because I'm not charging, and it looks like those Furies are in trouble. Oh yes, I haven't mentioned the Reign of Chaos yet, so obviously one of the big random elements of playing Demons of Chaos is that you can, I do sort of get a magic phase in that I get to roll on this Reign of Chaos table even though I have no wizards. The first turn I got the Nurgle's Rot, which didn't manage to affect anyone, and on the second turn I got the Demonic Possession roll, which was quite a tense moment, and it actually wasn't the last time I would get that roll during this game. I think I rolled it twice during this game, Demonic Possession, in which I believe it says a demon has caught the eye of one of the enemy wizards in the game, and he's got to pass the leadership test or be slain and replaced by a herald of Khorne in this case. But the shaman managed to resist the demonic possession. On Beastmen turn 2, there was a bit more movement forward. As you can see on the right hand side, those Ungor raiders have come through the ruins there to sort of face off against my blood crushers. Good luck to you. The chariot has moved a bit further forward in a bit of a tempting position. The unit of Gore, a little bit more, it's a little bit less bold, and have only moved up a little bit, along with the Razor Gore unit as well. And of course, those Harpies have charged into the Furies. It turned out to be a bit of a pillow fight in that top left corner there. The Harpies only managing to kill one Fury, and I think we got one wound in return as well, and so the combat was a draw. And it goes on. I should also mention that in Beastmen turn 2, I chose to dispel Melikoth's Mystifying Miasma and instead let the fireball go off, and I was lucky enough that the fireball didn't do any wounds anyway, so I made the right choice there. On the start of Demons turn 3 then, I declared a couple of charges. As you can see, you've got the Blood Crushers unit on the right hand side going into that small unit of Ungor Raiders, and I chose to charge over the top with the Furies into the chariot. I don't think the Furies will win that combat, but as I said, they are strength 5 on the charge. They've got an opportunity to take a wound or two off that chariot straight away, but of course the main thing is you're stopping that chariot from charging in at the same time as the Gore or the Razor Gore. And then some other repositioning there with my main unit of Bloodletters, so we can wait for those Gore to come into the trap of demons. The Skull Cannon failed to wound a Razor Gore this time around. The Blood Crushers managed to destroy those Ungor Raiders quite easily and reformed. Because they were right next to the ruins, they couldn't just sort of spin around, but they reformed in a 2x2 formation like that. And I believe the Furies actually won combat here, because we came in, did 2 wounds to that chariot, we took 2 wounds in return, and of course the chariot managed to pass, being so close to the general there, pass the break test, and we were locked into combat. And I think that was a good result for those Furies, because they've managed to block off that chariot, and also by holding in that combat for another turn, they're blocking that Razor Gore unit with Doomball General from sort of stampeding in at the same time as that Gore unit. So I think tactically that turned out to be quite a good move. Meanwhile, in the top left corner there, the Furies were locked into combat with those Harpies. Now, ordinarily, I would say that those Harpies would be able to grind out those Furies because they've just got a better stat line. However, those Harpies started to fail their fear tests, and of course they're not close to the general. And each turn now they were failing their fear tests, going down to weapon skill 1, needing 5s to hit, and of course we're hitting back, needing 3s to hit, and therefore the Furies were starting to win that combat each round. It's still locked into combat there, but it was starting to swing the way of the demons. And that's how things finished up at the end of Demons turn 3. I think I'm in quite a good position at the moment. I've still got my, that middle of the board there is obviously that main unit of Gore is still intact, but so are my main units, and we're sort of positioned quite well. So if that Gore unit comes forward, and I can't see anywhere else that it can go, we should be able to get a combo charge on that unit. So beginning of turn 3 for the Beastmen, the Doomball decides to charge out of the unit into the side of those Furies, and the Gore decide to move up a little bit more, and I think those are all the charges. Yep, so as you can see, the Doomball has gone straight through those Furies, just hacked them all up, and has done a sort of mini overrun. I think it's got a special rule where it feeds on some of the corpses and overruns a little bit. However, it was in the flank of those Furies, so he's now sort of come across in a bit of an awkward position there, because of course I've got those other unit of Blood Crushers waiting in the wings on the right hand side of this picture. And as I said before, the fight was still continuing towards the backboard edge there, but the Harpies were down to the last Harpy there, so hopefully those Chaos Furies would succeed in the next turn. I managed to dispel the Melicoths once again. The fireball came into my Blood Crushers, taking a wound off this time. But really, there's been no major casualties. Okay, my Furies, I've lost a unit of Furies there. The Ungor Raiders have been killed. Those Harpies are down to the last man. So it's really just sort of chaff fighting chaff at the moment. And all is yet to play for at the start of turn 4. So this is where it gets interesting. 2 combat armies. We're up to the beginning of turn 4, and now the charges happen. I managed to splash out a couple of quid for some pieces of cardboard painted red with the word charge written on them. So if I've paid for it, then why not use them for a nice little photo? And this is what we've got. So we've got the Blood Crushers on the right-hand side charging into the rear of the Doom Ball. The big unit of Bloodletters also charging into the flank of the Doom Ball. The unit of Blood Crushers with my Herald General in it charging into the front of the Gore, and the Skull Cannon charging into the flank of the Gore. Now, I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, actually, you know, I'm not going to be able to get all these charges in just because that unit of Bloodletters is too wide. And because that Doom Ball is obviously a single model and it's slightly ahead of that Gore unit, I'm not going to be able to make all 4 of these charges. I'm probably only going to be able to make 3 of them. But you know, it's always good to roll more dice than you need in Warhammer, just in case one of the charges is failed. But we ended up making all the charges, and they moved in like this. So I decided to keep the Bloodletters behind, who failed their charge. Those Blood Crushers have gone into the rear of that Doom Ball, hoping to take a wound off or 2. Their counter in front of him is not a wound counter, actually that's a frenzy counter, and that Doom Ball has something ridiculous like 7 attacks at the moment. The Blood Crushers with the Herald have gone into the front of that Gore. I'm really not sure at all how this is going to go. I mean, those Blood Crushers are quite tasty, especially when they're charging. They will be wounding on 2s, they've got stomps. I've got impact hits on the side there. However, that unit of Gore is just big, and they've got 2 hand weapons, and they've got the Mark of Thorn, so they're going to be throwing a fistful of dice at me. So I really don't know how that combat's going to go, but let's find out. So in the big combat in the middle, then the demons managed to win the combat in the end. So I rolled a big 6+1 for the impact hits. The Bloodletters are initiative 4 and strike just before the Gore, and yeah, I'd managed to get a lot of wounds. And then, of course, Mark picked up about 50 dice because there was just so many of them, and they attacked back. And actually, it worked out well for me in the end, having the Blood Crushers in there as opposed to the Bloodletters, because had it been the Bloodletters, all of those wounds would have taken models off and added to the combat resolution. And as it happened, because there are only 3 models in the unit, plus my character, plus my general, of course, the number of wounds was limited to 9. And therefore, even though I lost the whole unit, the amount of combat res wasn't excessive, and my general survived. So the Beastmen were steadfast and passed their break tests and reformed, as you can see in the picture, and we were locked in combat until the next round. On the other side then, this combat did not go as expected, actually. I think we caused 1 wound and we took a couple of wounds in return. We had a charge and a banner, and I think we ended up winning combat. And I was expecting to take a lot more casualties, actually, with that Doom Ball being particularly deadly at the time. But winning combat, breaking the Doom Ball's frenzy, he actually failed his reform check and had to remain with his rear facing those Blood Crushers. So I think overall it was a result for the demons there. Obviously there is still a chariot waiting to charge in, so perhaps the days are numbered for that Blood Crusher unit as a whole. But I think that was quite a result considering the size and power of that Doom Ball general. And that's how things looked at the end of Demons turn 4, Beastmen turn 4. So the chariot declares charge into the... Oh, I forgot to mention the Furies in the top of the picture there managed to kill that last Harpy, and they're now in play. So the chariot declares charge into the front of the Blood Crushers. The Razorgore decide not to try and charge the flank of the Blood Crushers there, but instead to move across and try and find a way through that gap towards my Bloodletters, perhaps seeing how things go in turn 5. In the combat phase, I declare a challenge with my Herald of Khorne there, who is already in base to base with the Shaman, and I end up sending the BSB to the back of the unit and killing the Shaman. I think that worked out quite well for me. I'm not sure if there was a better way that Mark could have played it. Perhaps accepting with the BSB would have been a bit too risky anyway, considering I had the Juggernaut attacks as well. So he was quite unfortunate there. However, without my impact hits and without all the attacks from the unit that's gone there, I'm sort of fighting a losing battle here against this big block of gore. In the other combat, the Doomball fights on, killing a couple of Blood Crushers combined with the impact hits of the Chariot. And in fighting back, we managed to kill the Chariot. And I think maybe even take another wound off that Doomball, I can't remember. Demons turn 5, so getting into the final throes of the game now. The the Chaos Furies charge the rear of the Gore unit. Turned out that's probably a bad idea because they're just going to sort of get killed and add to the Gore's combat res, but seemed like a good idea at the time. The Bloodletters still can't fit in through that gap, so they've just moved up, waiting to see what sort of space arises and how they can be relevant in turn 6. And the fight continues. The charge from those Furies was a big failure. The Gores get a bunch of wounds, as you can see the sort of wound counters there on my units, and we lose combat and everyone just pops through the instability test. So my Herald, the Skull Cannon, the Furies all end up dying. However, I was lucky enough to keep my Blood Crushers alive and in the fight. The Doomball and the Blood Crushers both kind of fluff their attacks, and that combat carries on into Beastmen turn 5. And here it is then, the final hurrah. The Gores and the Razorgore both get a combo charge into the front of the Bloodletters. Again, not sure how this combat's going to go. That Bloodletter unit is still at full strength. The Gore are no longer frenzied, but still have a lot of attacks. The Razorgore have lost 2 of their number to cannon shots earlier on in the game, but still looking pretty intact. And this was when things would get very interesting when we're in the final stage of the game. So, what happened? Mark chose to do the fight on the right-hand side first, which turned out to be a bit of an error, because we got lucky, and the Doomball fluffed its attacks. The Blood Crushers managed to get a wound off, combined with the banner, gave us a victory of 2 over the Doomball, who failed its break test, and we pursued and cut him down. And those Blood Crushers ended up in the flank of the Razorgore, ready to fight in the big combat. And that, I don't know, I mean, looking back, I guess we'll never find out whether that swung the game or not. But after rolling all the dice out for this big combat, it fell to the side of the demons. And we ended up pursuing, not catching them straight away, but of course, with all the units left fleeing, the turn 6 was just simply rolling dice again to see whether we would catch them or not, and we ended up running them all down on Demons turn 6. So it finished there with a turn 6 tabling of the Beastmen. Really fun game for me, actually. I was, as I said, my first time playing against Beastmen. The Doomball with the 3-up ward save and the ridiculous frenzy where he just mounts up loads of attacks was scary, and I actually thought that unless I get that big unit of Bloodletters into that Doomball somehow, I'm not going to be able to defeat it, and actually ended up defeating it with Blood Crushers. So it just shows that, when you've got a big character like that, even if it's got loads of attacks, just being in combat for several turns increases the likelihood that it's going to fluff its attacks one turn And then if you've got a unit in there that can get a wound or two, and you've got a banner or a rank or whatever, you can break these big monsters and run them down. Tactically, I think things worked out quite well for me. I was able to sort of hang back and sort of set the trap for the Beastmen to come into. Obviously, with two very close combat armies, not much shooting at all, very little magic. It's really sort of a game of cat and mouse as to who can get the charge off. And I was lucky enough to get some charges in with those Blood Crusher units. Obviously, the charges on the Gore didn't work out so well, but we managed to get them down to a manageable number, so that when they finally got into my Bloodletters, they didn't have quite so many attacks, and we were able to win the combat in the end. So yeah, really enjoyable game. That's all for today. I then had another game later that day against an Orc and Goblin army coming up soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment below. Cheers everybody, speak to you soon.